Hello and welcome to Let's Get Political, the show where we talk to young people about the issues that affect them most. And today we're joined by Ewan Quayle for Labour. He's representing Labour today. And Rhys Edmonds is representing the Liberal Democrats. Wave, say hello. Hello. And also we have John Batchelor representing the Green Party. Unfortunately, the Conservative Party and UKIP were unable to attend today. We did ask them, but they couldn't make it. So, before we start any discussion, what we're going to do is show you a video of what young people think about the issues around university fees.
What do you think of the current state of university fees?
Yeah, I think they are quite extortionate, really. I think uni, to be honest, I personally think it should be free, but I know that's never going to happen. But I think it should be a lot less. It stops a lot of people from going, really, that it costs so much.
I think they need to be lowered just purely because we're going to learn, and we're meant to get like jobs and have a good education to get a job, but then they like make the fees so high that it's basically impossible. So it's a bit stupid that they're making us pay so much for an education that we want.
Yeah, and personally, I think it's one thing that puts me off uni, because I think if you do go to uni and you get the job that you like or you want, and it ends up being a good job, isn't it when you earn over a certain amount you have to pay back your fees? And that's quite off-putting, because say if you did, I'm sure you'd have to earn quite a lot. Is it 30 grand? Something like that, yeah. So that's quite a lot, and if you pay it back, it's not too much, but I don't know.
So £9,000 a year is a lot of money. Ewan Quayle, you're here representing Labour. You claim, or not you specifically, but Labour claims to be able to reduce the uni fees to about £6,000. Is that actually now possible?
I think it is possible, and the reason why we're reducing it to 6,000 and not pledging to scrap it entirely, like the Green Party, is because, like the guy said in there, it's not possible. I don't think it's realistic to be able to do that, and I want to be able to be in a party that promises realistic things, because I think the reason why so many people are turned off politics is that politicians don't keep their promises. So putting it to £6,000, we've showed we can do it, so let's do it.
Well, talking of promises, Lib Dem,
yeah.
It was inevitable really that was going to be brought up. Tuition fees, you promised to keep them at nil, they're now £9,000. What do you think?
It was ugly, it was messy, it was a compromise.
But yes,
yeah.
It may have been all of those things, but young people are having to pay for their future.
I know. The best we can say is no one would have to pay up front, and if you earn more when you're working, you pay more back, and the very poor are excluded. I do want to make the point, though, if you're voting in Cambridge and you're voting Liberal, you're voting for an MP who voted against them, and you're also voting for an MP who was
didn't do
actually...
much good, though, did it?
No, he was commended by the NUS yesterday. The only MP in the country to have been commended by the NUS as a great friend of the student movement, and because he's consistently stood against tuition fees, and he calls for absolute reduction, and he's also saved disabled student allowance and worked really, really hard with the NUS, with the student movement, and his Labour opponent supports tuition fees. He said they were a good thing.
Thank you very much. Well, what about you, John? What do you think, in terms of the Green Party, realistically, can we keep asking students to pay £9,000 a year for their futures?
Not at all. I think that's completely obscene, and I think it's actually this resignation that we're going to have to pay even £6,000 for education is something that really we shouldn't be asking young people for. I think that we should be paying for that as a country, and it is realistic. In our manifesto, you can look at it yourself. There's the tables at the end which actually lay out exactly how we're going to pay for everything through things like cutting Trident. So it is a realistic target, and I think it's something that really is important that we do have to aim for.
Labour, Ewan, one more point.
Okay, well, if I could pick up on
and if you can keep it brief.
Yeah, pick up on the Lib Dem said, and talking about, you don't directly pay for it. No, you don't. But the point at which you do pay for it is if you earn over £21,000. The average wage in the UK is nearly £27,000. So, you don't have to be earning a lot to actually pay it back.
Thank you very much. And now we have questions from the audience. Our first question is coming from this side of the room. Your name is, please? And your question is?
In a couple of sentences, explain why under 25s should vote for your party.
Couple of sentences. Okay. Who wants to go first on that one? Anyone ready?
Yeah, I'm happy to go first.
Go for it.
Well, to be honest, if you want to sustain the planet that we have and be able to look forward to a future which is both environmentally healthy and provides a more equal society, then green is the only option. Because although the other parties will talk about climate change, actually, given in the leaders' debate they didn't, but they claim to talk about climate change, but actually the action that's taken isn't anywhere near enough at the moment. So that's why you should pick me.
Thank you very much. John, Lib Dems.
I'm Reece.
Sorry.
No problem. Because we've worked really, really hard to stop the Tories screwing you over completely. We've worked really, really hard to make sure we've had the biggest expansion of youth apprenticeships since the 1950s. More and more jobs have been created for young people than ever before. And if we're in government again, we're going to push and push and push for that and make sure the Tories or Labour are held to account.
Ewan, for Labour?
Yep. I think young people should vote for us because, especially at this election, we are laying out a whole load of pledges, especially in education and for further education colleges like this. We're focusing on students who don't want to go to uni, who want to have a different style of learning, and we're going to be able to bring in things like the technical baccalaureate, which will help people in practical skills to be able to go out and get a job.
Okay. One question I'd like to ask from all three of you briefly is, how can young people trust politicians? What can they do? What can you or politicians do to ensure that young people can trust them? I'll start with you.
Yeah, well, it's ultimately you are voting for your individual MP or representative, so it's really up to the individual MP. So, for example, in Brighton with Caroline Lucas, the Green MP, the amount of trust that she has with her constituents allows her to be a really effective constituency MP, and I'm sure if you ask anyone there that they will agree with that. But could I just pick up on a couple of points made? Because actually the Liberal Democrats are claiming to have sort of increased all this, the apprenticeships, the number of apprenticeships and number of jobs. But actually there are so many apprenticeships at the moment going to people over 25. And actually, the youth are being neglected far too much. Many of the jobs that are being created are zero-hours contracts or low-wage jobs, whereas actually what we need to be doing is encouraging the skills education, which is why the Greens, by the sounds of it, want to really focus on non-university education as well. We're going to, for example, bring into line the funding for sixth form colleges and further education with schools and academies and other institutions which at the moment get tax breaks, whereas the further education colleges don't, which I just don't see justification for that.
Yeah, actually our local MP, Julian Huppert, has been asking questions in Parliament with the Prime Minister and pushing really, really hard to end this unfair exemption whereby schools don't have to pay VAT, but colleges like this do. So a real local champion working really, really hard for young people who you can trust.
But what about the fact that under 25s is still not getting enough support really in terms of apprenticeships? And are apprenticeships the only answer?
No, I mean, we need to do a lot more, but it's better than ever before. We've spent millions and millions of pounds on colleges so they can provide advice, provide help for apprenticeships.
Can I just pick you up on Julian?
Yeah.
He actually voted to scrap educational maintenance allowance, which helps the poorest students that come here being able to learn here. So if he wants to talk about local champion for young people, I don't think so.
I know, it's a compromise. It's a compromise, but because of this, because he talks to the government and he listens and he, there's an exchange of ideas, he was able to save disabled students' allowance personally. Personally, he lobbied the ministers, because he's in the government, to save disabled students' allowance so disabled students can get money to live.
But what about the poorest students? Those who come from more disadvantaged backgrounds that don't necessarily have a disability. They're being penalised, aren't they, by not having the EMA?
No, I don't support the cut to EMA. It's a compromise. We didn't win the election. We're in government. We do our best.
Yeah, let's,
that fair?
EMA costs, well, the Greens want to bring it back in, and it would cost 0.5 billion to 0.7 billion. When you compare that to the amount that we're spending on something like Trident, which is hundreds of billions of pounds, it's actually a very small amount, and I think it's shameful that they're cutting areas like that, which aren't actually, they're not making a huge difference to the deficit reduction, but they're making a huge difference to the young people who could otherwise be supported in their educations.
Yeah, do you have anything to say, Ewan? No, nothing at all?
No.
I find that hard to believe.
It's not in the Labour manifesto, is it, to bring it back? Yeah, mate.
I'm not too sure.
No, definitely not.
But do you think something like that would encourage more young people to stay in further education?
Yeah, well, I mean, they have to. Now they have to stay until they're 18.
But it is a struggle in order to do so for some.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I'm 100% in favour of bringing it back. Like I said, it's a low cost compared to things like Trident, which I know my party's in favour of. I'm not, but...
You keep mentioning Trident. Do you think that getting rid of Trident is actually going to be the answer to everything?
Oh,
what
no,
about
not at
our
all.
security?
No, we are, but what I'm saying is that there are things which we spend a huge amount of money on that could actually be diverted elsewhere, like Trident, the subsidies that fossil fuel companies are still receiving. There's a huge amount of road building money which we want to direct more to local transport, buses and trains. So there are places where we can cut which aren't on the front line and going to affect really the lives of young people in the way that the austerity of the coalition has.
Well, John and Reece, you're both at university. Ewan, you're here at Cambridge Regional College. What advice for somebody who is thinking about going to university but is terrified about the amount of money they're going to have to pay would you give them? You say you're activists for your parties, but you're also students.
Well, yeah, I mean, yeah, I really don't like the fact that I'm going to be leaving university with 27 grand of debt just from tuition fees. For me, I did it anyway because I didn't have a choice over whether I'm going to pay the fees, and I wanted to go to university. So, it's possible, and there is some support for those on lower incomes, but it's, yeah, so it can be done. Yeah, it's tricky because obviously I don't want to see fees, but I have to pay them.
Thank you. Ewan, very quickly, can you tell me, do you want to go to university, or are you put off by the fact that there's so much money coming your way, or going away from you rather than coming to you?
Well, I don't want to go to university for a number of reasons, but the cost is one of them. Yeah, I'm more practical, I'm less academic, I like to sort of do stuff. So I do radio, so I'd rather want to be in the radio with a team working rather than sort of writing about essays about the radio industry or something like that. But advice-wise, if you want to go to university, then go. Like I said, there is assistance for poorer people, but bringing tuition fees down as much as possible is definitely, it should be a priority.
Thank you to all three of you. I think we're going to be moving on to another question in just a moment. It will be another video, and we'll find out what young people are thinking. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. And of course, just to remind you, who we're talking to is Ewan for Labour, John for Green, and Reece for Lib Dems. And we're going to be finding out about youth unemployment and your concerns around those issues.
The government is helping young people maintain employment.
Well, no, I think that the whole bit work for younger people, and as it goes on, the contract system's messed up. They've got 0-hour sort of contract stuff, and that means that you work if they want you to work. If they don't want you, then you're having the week off, whether you like it or not, and you're not getting paid either way. And I think that if the number one thing they do is get rid of that and get stable hours, because the second you have stable hours, you can schedule more shifts in.
I feel that a lot of young people, I suppose some friends of mine, are having to turn to uninsured cash in hand work, which is very dangerous, as you have no health insurance, obviously. And I feel that if the government, where they would raise the employment rates in this country, put more jobs out there, specialised for young people who have very low experience in any kinds of work, then maybe, would turn a lot of things.
John, the Green Party, we've been talking about university fees, we've spoken about apprenticeships. This leads quite nicely into the fact that a lot of people, especially young people, well, they work very hard. I teach here and I know how many young people are working hard and doing courses but not getting much money for what they do. What does the Green Party hope to achieve should you get some MPs into Parliament?
Well, the first thing that I'd say is we want to make the minimum wage into a living wage, which means that by 2020 we think the minimum wage should be £10 an hour, because at the moment it's just the minimum wage isn't enough to properly live on, which is just really disgraceful, really. You could be working full time but still not have enough money to live on. So that's what we do first. I didn't quite mention in the last one, but we are going to increase apprenticeship funding by 30%, because actually what's happening at the moment is so many of the jobs that are available are low wage or low skill jobs. So what we want to do is train up more and more people to do the jobs that are going to really be fulfilling and be good for the economy.
Thank you very much. And Reece?
Yeah, we need to keep the economy growing. Unemployment's lower than it's been for quite a long time. We need to keep that working. When the government took office, we had a £150 billion deficit. We'd had the biggest recession since the 1920s. It was really difficult. We got stuck in. We got people getting jobs, people working, young people, apprenticeships. We need to keep doing lots more of that. The Green Party don't believe in economic growth. We should bear this in mind. The Green Party...
Do you want to come back on
yes,
that one?
I should come back on it. Okay, so we live on a finite planet. Can you see it being possible to keep growing forever and ever, eating more and more into resources? It's just it's logically inconsistent. The reason it's not being questioned is because it's a convenient narrative, really, for Labour, Liberal Democrats and Conservatives, because what they say is, look, we'll get growth, and then when we have this growth, then you'll be better off. Whereas what we're saying is, let's make people better off. We don't have to make the pie bigger for the average person to be better off. We just need to share it more equally. Because at the moment, there's so much inequality in society, so we should be focusing more on sharing rather than growing.
Yeah, there's no reason why economic growth necessarily means using more and more resources. We could use the same resources more efficiently and let the economy grow that way. You know, 200 years ago, we were using whale oil. And people might say, oh, we can't have endless economic growth because we're going to run out of whale oil eventually. What we did is we learned to use other resources to manage our economy differently, and we got people's living standards going up that way.
Thank you. I'm sorry, I'm going to interrupt you there. Ewan, zero-hour contracts, youth unemployment.
Yeah.
What does Labour say about this?
Well, Labour will ban zero-hours contracts that are exploiting workers. I was actually speaking to someone, because I go canvassing, knocking on people's doors, and I was speaking to a lady. She works 1 day a week and she's not able to go out and get another job. I think that's absolutely disgraceful. And actually, sorry, I just don't...
They've been banned, Ewan. Very recently they've been banned.
Okay, well, I find the argument that, you know, oh, unemployment's down and all the rest of it. Do you know what? Yeah, it is down, but what kind of jobs are we making? We are making jobs that are so insecure, that are low paid, and people just don't want jobs like that. People aren't being encouraged to go to the workplace, and a lot of the systems that you put in place are just forcing people straight into insecurity, and it's wrong.
Well, yeah, I've got to agree with what Ewan just said. I think it is. The coalition, they're claiming that they've done wonders with the economy, that unemployment's down, but when you actually look more closely at the figures, you can see the kind of economy that they're leaving is not what we want to be living in.
As a young person yourself, Reece, what is your concern about going into the workforce when you finish university?
I do share all these concerns. I agree that it's hard to get a graduate job that pays well. We have to spend all this time doing unpaid internships, which, you know, cut off large numbers of ordinary people who just can't afford to work for 3 months with no money. We need to do a lot more. I just want you to bear in mind that when the government took over, the economy was nosediving. Massive banking crash, biggest crisis in years, massive deficit. You've got to look at it fairly. You've got to look at it compared to where we were. And you must bear in mind that the economy's better and people are getting richer slowly.
Labour was in government, clearly, before this.
Yep.
Briefly, do you think the Tories and the Lib Dems have made a difference with their coalition?
Statistically, they have improved the economy, but like I will say before, how they have improved the economy that they've made for working people is a disgrace, and it is incredibly insecure. And can I just say,
briefly,
that when Labour left office, we are actually having a growth of GDP of 1%.
Okay, I'm going to have to cut you off there. So sorry about that. We are moving on to our next video now, which is about the welfare system and benefits.
How do you feel about the current welfare system?
I believe that people should have to work for their money, and if you're claiming benefits, that's fair enough. If you don't earn enough, you can get the benefits, but if you're not working entirely and it's not due to a health issue, then you should have to work or you will not get benefits at all.
The people that are getting the money for not working, they should just, an ultimatum, like, you've got to work for the money. Yeah. If you're fine, if you're capable of working, if you're not, disabled, you've got a disability, then you should work. And if you're not going to work, you won't get the money. Which seems like a massive ultimatum, and it's quite kind of, it's like, whoa. And like, some people might not get the jobs. People go to the job centre and they'll apply for jobs and they just won't get one. But I reckon
that's different from like actually trying.
Yeah, because I reckon like the people that come to the job centre, when my mum and dad works, and when they actually, sit down, have an interview in a civil, they do end up getting a job, or they'll get some help in some way. But if they're gonna cause arguments like a lot of them do, then it's not gonna work out for them, and they don't.
So there are obvious concerns about the welfare system. Ewan, speaking on behalf of Labour, how are you hoping to get more people off of benefits and into work?
Okay, well, we've actually got a plan to take out of work benefit payments for 18 to 21-year-olds and not give them the cash and put it into actual job training schemes. So we will give them the opportunity to train for a job instead of just getting the cash and spending it how they please. And any young person who is under the age of 21 that's been unemployed for over a year, they will be offered a job under a Labour government, and if they refuse, like Girl said, they'll have their benefits taken away, because I believe in a society where if you can work, you should work.
Thank you. Greens.
Well, I don't accept that in all the cases I don't accept it's the workers' fault that there aren't enough jobs to go around. I think that's the fault of the government, really. I don't think that workers should be held responsible by the fact that there's not jobs for everyone. So I think actually saying that if you're not in work, you can't get benefits isn't doesn't make sense, because we're punishing those who are already really struggling to make ends meet. And the welfare system that we have in the UK, whilst yes it does need changes, is I think a great asset to our country.
Thank you very much. Reece.
I think we should cut benefits for the elderly and wealthy. If you are over 65, you get your pension, which is taxed, but you also get 2 massive cash grants, because elderly people go out and vote, and you guys don't in general. So they get 2 massive cash grants. Get a big grant for winter fuel, and they get a free TV licence, and they get their bus pass as well. And this is regardless of income. So we get very, very wealthy people living on the Costa del Sol, getting a large grant to pay their winter fuel. Okay, and this isn't fair, because you're getting really, really hard hit with tuition fees and benefit cuts for the poor. And we would make sure that when benefits are to be cut, they would be cut for the wealthy rather than for the working age poor.
Can you please extrapolate on the whole idea of cutting for the elderly, cutting benefits for the elderly?
The elderly wealthy, so we means test it. So if you're poor and elderly, obviously you need the winter fuel allowance, you get it. If you're a wealthy expat living on the Costa del Sol, you don't. They wouldn't make it like that if you were young. They would only let you have it if you were poor. But for the wealthy, for the elderly, they just get a grant without means testing.
So, Ewan, do you think that taking away from the older, rich people will actually help younger people, like the people sitting here today?
Well, no, because you're just transferring, you've just avoided the question and transferred the blame onto older people. What are you going to do for younger people? I agree with the points you made. I think that it's silly that rich, old people are able to claim winter fuel allowance and all this. They don't actually need it. So I agree on that point, but could you just sort of explain what you're going to do for young people on benefits?
We spend it on education, on training, on apprenticeships.
No, but what about a young person who is on job seekers allowance? Let's say he's 22. So what are you going to do for that person?
Well, we can make sure benefits rise in line with inflation. they've been cut over the last few years. We can make sure people get a decent amount to live.
But isn't, John, keeping benefits in line with inflation actually going to mean that a lot of people who feel they can't find a job might want to stay on benefits?
No, no, I don't agree with that at all. I think if it's not going up with inflation, that means a cut. And that's what the Liberal Democrats, along with the Conservatives, have done in the last few years.
Totally, yeah. But it would have been far worse otherwise. Yeah. That's all we can
I don't accept that. But there is an important point that you've just made, which is that at the moment, because the turnout amongst young people for elections is so low, it does mean that governments are able to give all these enticing policies to pensioners, like you've just mentioned, which, whilst really not really offering that much for the youth. So the most important thing is to actually get high turnout, and if we have a lot of young people turning out this time, we might actually get the government to listen to our generation more.
More young people voting, is that going to make a difference with Labour in terms of benefits? Briefly.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've laid the promises in front of you, but I mean, that was an important point that was made. Elderly people vote a lot more than younger people, and therefore parties give them stuff. So I say, if you want parties to pay attention to you, as brutal it is, vote for them.
Thank you very much. Right, so we've spoken there about benefits, and now I have another audience question. Young man in the front row there. What's your question, please?
Question is, what does your party plan to do to secure the future of further education, to let people continue studies after school?
So it seems that education is really a big concern. What are you going to do? We'll start with you,
If you listened to Nick Clegg's speech the other day, well, I'm sure you did, he said that any government with Lib Dems in it would make sure the education budget, the whole of the education budget, from cradle to college, so everything, further education, higher education, all of it, was ring-fenced. So there'd be no cuts in education. So any government with Lib Dems in would make sure there were no cuts.
Right, but then any government with Lib Dems had promised at the time that they weren't going to increase tuition fees. How can all of these young people here trust what the Lib Dems are saying?
Because we've been in government, we've been tested. We know now. We know now not to make silly promises.
You were tested and you failed. Yeah.
We know not to make silly promises. This is something we've thought out. We know where the money's coming from. We'll do it.
John?
Well, yeah, as I mentioned, we want to do things like bring the taxation for sixth form colleges and further education colleges into line with schools, and increase apprenticeships, because we do. I do think that under certain governments, there has been a kind of feeling that kind of education is university education is focused on, and there's been too much of a neglect of the other training colleges and other processes, apprenticeships. But I've just got a question for you, because I saw that in Labour's manifesto they want to make English and maths compulsory to 18 within colleges or something. I'm just wondering how that's going to work, or is it a good idea?
Personally, as certain people will know, I'm not particularly in favour of that. I think it's silly. I'm taking my GCSE English for the third time now, and I'm on set to get a good grade, but the way that they conduct exams and the way that they mark your work is not realistic, and it's not representative.
That's not quite answering his question, though. His question was, is it going to be beneficial to keep young people studying English and maths to the age of 18? What will be the point of it?
No, I don't think, actually, it's overall
You personally
beneficial.
don't, but what does the Labour Party, why is Labour coming
Well,
up with
I mean,
that?
it's in our manifesto, so yes, obviously Tristram Hunt thinks it is beneficial to do that. I can see where he's coming from, but as a experienced person who's experiencing the system now, having to take my GCSEs English, it doesn't make a difference.
Okay, thank you. And actually, I think in terms of education, there have been cuts all around, lots of money going into other places. Green Party, how do you hope then to create a potential future workforce with the cuts that the next government will be inheriting?
Well, we don't want to carry on with the cuts. That's the short answer. We're against austerity. We're the only party here who's against austerity, because actually austerity is a system of punishing those most vulnerable, poorest, whilst actually the rich are creating and actually conserving the wealth. So in the last few years, actually, we have seen growth. The rich have been getting richer, but actually people on the lower incomes are sort of around the same level of income as before. So, yeah.
Great. Thank you very much. We will be going now to another video, and I think this one will be about immigration and the concerns around that. So we'll find out what the different parties think after the video, which will coming up in a second or two.
Current views on immigration.
They are absolutely appalling because they're not saving, they're just letting immigrants through pretty much. And as well, open the gates so they can walk in.
Do kind of hear a lot on the media about them getting more benefits than English citizens, English-born citizens. So I'd kind of like to see that if let them in, but don't give them as many benefits if we need them ourselves.
I believe that the state's actually quite well at the moment. I mean, there are a lot of people flooding in, but that's a good thing. They want to come over to England to live a better life. I myself, as an immigrant from another country, South Africa, I believe that this provided me with a much better state of life than I would have gotten back home. So I think let immigrants in as long as they have all their papers, they pay correctly to get in, everything is done well, it's right. And I don't think any party is handling it correctly at the moment, but they could do.
Right, so Reece with the Lib Dems, there's big concern stoked by a number of parties about immigrants coming into this country. What do the Liberal Democrats think about this, and what are you going to do?
Well, we're going to fight it. Immigration is a thoroughly good thing. People come here, they work hard, they pay into our economy. That's why our economy is growing, because we've got people coming into the Philippines to staff our hospitals. We've got people coming in to staff our schools. We've got Bulgarians and Romanians coming in, working hard, making our economy grow. No one can turn up and claim benefits immediately. That's a Daily Mail lie. You have to wait a long time before you claim benefits. This means that anyone who comes here is not coming here to feed off the welfare state, they're coming here to work hard. And we must fight any party that says differently. And that's mainly UKIP, but it also is to some extent the Tories, and to a lesser extent, but still they're doing it, Labour.
Well, there you go. How are you going to respond to that one?
Well, Labour is not anti-immigration at all. Every year I go to central London in March and I march alongside about 10,000 people against UKIP, against racism, against bigotry, really. As it showed last year, a report, immigrants contribute £20 billion more than they take out, things like benefits, and you can't just walk in and just get the whole get the welfare state and get everything. No, you can't do that. Like you said, you have to wait a long time. Immigrants contribute so much, and it's a real shame that we have parties like UKIP trying to pretty much lie to the public and make them think that they're taking over. They build our houses, they clean our business building. You know, they do everything. What we need to focus on is stop the exploitation of migrant workers. We need to make sure they're being paid properly and they're being put in proper conditions and not being exploited by people who want to take vast amounts of immigrants in on ridiculously low pay.
Thank you very much, Ewan. Yeah, oh, you're ready to go. Go for it.
Yeah. Well, firstly, specifically on Labour, you know, what you said is great, but actually one of the Labour's key election mugs was, I don't know if you saw about this, they brought out a mug saying controls on immigration.
And that was stupid, so yeah. I say sorry.
Okay. Well, anyway, but that's not the most important point here. But really, immigration being presented, it's a shame that UKIP aren't here to defend their position. But immigration is not a quick fix to our country's stopping immigration is not a quick fix to our country's problems. Actually, we need to tackle the causes of the issues that we're having in this country by improving workers' rights, such as increasing the minimum wage and making sure that that is properly enforced. But also, we need to look at why the immigrants are coming here in the first place, which is quite often due to horrendous things happening in their own countries, wars, poverty. So actually, a party like UKIP, who are trying to say, okay, we want to make sure immigrants aren't coming here, but we also want to stop giving to international. We want to reduce the international aid budget. That sort of position is just not tenable, really, because actually the thing that you want to do to reduce the number of people coming here is to actually make the place where they live originally a better place for them to live, so that they won't feel the need to. But immigrants do contribute a huge amount. I echo what these two have said.
I mean, look, UKIP's not here to defend itself, nor are any Conservative representatives. So mention them, but we need to be a little bit careful about that. To Reece, you know, we just spent about 5 minutes discussing youth unemployment and issues around that, and there are concerns that people who come from different countries are taking jobs that actually aren't there. What can we do? Make more jobs or fewer immigrants? What?
The statistics don't show that, though. The statistics show that immigrants coming here grows the economy. There's not a finite number of jobs in the economy. You know, if an immigrant comes here and starts a business, that's 4 or 5 new jobs that's going to be made, people working for him or her. So I completely refute the idea that there's a finite number of jobs and immigrants taking some means British people can't have them. That's just not true.
Thank you. Do you want to say anything, Ewan?
Yeah, sure. Yep, completely right. Lots of immigrants that come here do set up small businesses and they employ local people. One thing I would say, which we do need to stop because it's just sensible to do so, is stop agency firms only advertising in other countries. I think that is just, it doesn't make sense. It's not fair on the people working here, and the only reason they do that is because they will workers from abroad will work for a lot less. And I think we need to advertise here before we advertise elsewhere.
Thank you very much. Okay, we're about to go to another video, and this one is discussing benefits and the National Health Service, which is clearly
on benefits and healthcare.
I feel that the NHS has done a great lot for this country. It came around at a time where the country, its health and sort of lifestyle was sort of quite low and down, and sort of the system of not having to pay like up front or any like medical bills if a loved one or yourself is injured. I think it's really good. It's sort of subsidised with tax and stuff. So I think going private would be wrong.
Some people, just like I have myself, are given you know appalling treatment in this country because you know they're sort of living trying to find work, and it's so difficult to find it, trying to find accommodation, etc. Basically, I found it so hard to find work, and it was earlier this year, February time, I used to have a disability living allowance to help me sort of live in the long run, but then all of a sudden they took it away from me when I applied for another form of allowance. They took it away, and now I'm stranded trying to find work with still.
Ewan, for the Labour Party, we'll start with the NHS first. Should we privatise it?
Absolutely not. No way. The NHS is a precious institution, and quite honestly, it's just about being decent. It's about a decent society where if somebody is ill, you should not be hit by a bill after treatment. And the reason why it was set up, one of the reasons it was set up in the first place, was that, like I said, really low living standards. You treat people, they're better, more people go to work, the economy grows. So actually this whole thing about, you know, the NHS is draining our economy, you know, we're just having to pay more and more tax for it, and it's not doing any good. Actually, if we got rid of the NHS, there would be a lot of people suffering, and that would be dangerous for society and for the economy and everything all round.
Thank you. Reece, for the Lib Dems, is it feasible to keep the NHS going the way that it is?
I think it is, but it needs more funding. The Chief Executive of the NHS, so not a politician, an impartial speaker, has said it needs £8 billion. It's in our manifesto that we will provide the £8 billion to the NHS. So it's properly funded and it can serve the needs of Britain in 2020.
Yes, we've, as Greens, we've also committed to £8 billion, or it might be even more, sorry, I can't quite remember, but it's definitely at least £8 billion, which unfortunately Labour hasn't quite, I don't think so. Yeah, the NHS is extremely important, which is why we in the Greens don't want to see any of it run by private companies. Labour seems to be happy to have 5% of NHS making profit, I think. I'm fairly sure I've seen 5%, but okay. Well, any profit in the NHS is the wrong place to be making profit. The NHS is a service and it's no place for profit making. But just also, we've got to kind of look at why the NHS is so strained, and you've got to look at the reasons for that people are needing its services so much. And there are just things like the amount of air pollution that we have at the moment is causing a huge number of respiratory problems, including here in Cambridge, which is actually tackling the pollution, which the Green Party are the only party that have efficient policies to do. Actually tackling that issue is going to then mean that the NHS, the burden's reduced, and so the money can be spent more effectively.
Yeah. You and Labour Party, you know where I'm going with this, don't you? You say you want to keep it entirely free, and yet you still want at least 2 or 5% profit from it.
Well, no. I mean, what's in our manifesto is that we've said private companies can make 2% profit out of the NHS, and after that 2%, any other profit that they make will be put straight back into the NHS. It will be taken away from them and put back into the public system.
Isn't that effectively still privatising, even if in part, you're still privatising the NHS?
But it's not privatising. I mean, private health companies are here, they're not going to go away, so we might as well use them to help take the pressure off the NHS, because there is massive pressures in the NHS. So yeah, I mean, but the profits that they make off of that will go back into a publicly funded health service.
But then who would have control of the NHS?
The people, the government. That's who will control the NHS. It's not privatisation to let private companies help us, and we're going to scrap the Health and Social Care Act 2012, which says that we can put all of the NHS contracts around the country up for sale just like that at a moment's notice.
Isn't that semantics, though?
Yeah, that's in the manifesto. We're going to completely scrap that because we think it's wrong. So we're not selling off the NHS. We're going to use private companies at a very limited profit and limited extension to ease the pressure while we combine lots of different services together to make sure that the NHS functions differently for the 21st century.
Reece for the Lib Dems, isn't that semantics?
I don't like privatisation in the NHS. What he described was private companies running NHS services. I don't like it when Labour did it because they introduced it. I don't like it when the coalition has increased it. I'm glad that Julian Huppert voted against that. We should make that clear. I'm just a bit wary of another massive reorganisation, even if it's perhaps for some greater good down the line. The pressures on funding in our NHS are really severe, and we need to make sure the money's there and be wary of fiddling with structures yet again.
John?
Well, I think actually the NHS is going to need reorganisation. My uncle works as a clinical on the clinical commissioning group of a trust where he's a doctor who is being paid to decide which private companies are going to provide the services for his departments, which is just really not an efficient way to do it. We actually, not only would we get rid of the Health and Social Care Act, which they brought in, but we'd also get rid of the initial privatisation, which they brought in 10 and 15 years ago, which should never have happened. I just don't accept that profit has a place in the NHS, even if it's 2%. That's still money going out of taxes to private companies.
Thank you. We're going to be wrapping up very soon, but what I'd like to do is tackle one more question that was in that video. Young man talking about benefits and disability benefits. People with disabilities are being hit hard. Lib Dems, what are you going to do to change that?
Stop hitting them hard.
How?
How? Well, vote for us. We get seats. People like Julian Huppert will go out and fight for things like disability living allowance, which, as I must remind you, he lobbied the minister to make sure it was saved.
Thank you very much. John for the Green Parties.
Well, I don't accept that. I don't know how voting Liberal Democrat now they're suddenly going to go with different policies to the ones they've been voting for the last 5 years. I don't think that I think they've really neglected the vulnerable, including disabled, really unfairly, and it needs to stop.
Thank you. Ewan, you're the last word for the show. Quickly.
Disabled people have been hit really, really hard over the last 5 years, arguably the worst. So there's a thing called the work capability assessment.
I'm afraid I'm going to have to stop. I'm really sorry. I am going to have to stop you there because unfortunately we have come to the end of the programme. It's been fantastic. Thank you very much for debating with us today. This is for young people to have had their say in politics. A huge thank you to our panellists, Ewan, and also to John and to Reese. Thank you for being such a great audience. I'm Pam Mungroo, and this has been Let's Get Political. Thank you for watching.